From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South. I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. We start in Mexico, where the group of Central American migrants in Tijuana is growing in size. A reported 3,500 migrants are currently staying in the border city, with the latest group arriving from Mexicali. Authorities say numbers are starting to take a toll on shelters, which are nearing their limit. Despite these difficulties, many migrants have started to look for work, with authorities helping them finding ways to survive legally.
Migrants have started to fill out job applications. They're talking about their previous jobs and what they can do, as they face a long wait for their asylum requests in the US to be approved. They're trying to make the most out of a bad situation, so they are looking for work in the meantime.
I'd rather leave the shelter and find work. I have always worked. I am not a thief or anything like that.
In addition to earning an income and lifting their self-esteem, finding work allows migrants the opportunity to break stereotypes and prove to their host country that they are good, hard-working people.
We want to show everyone that we want to work, that we are good workers.
There are work opportunities for them in Tijuana, a city of nearly 3 million people.
This is a city of immigrants, fears of all. Our parents, our grandparents, everyone came here looking for a better life. We cannot close the door to anyone. Therefore, available jobs should be given equally to Mexicans and migrants.
Some of the nearly 3,000 migrants living in the shelter at the Benito Juarez Sports Complex have found a job. They are grateful for every day they get to return to their families.
It's such a relief to have work. I'm no longer hopeful somebody will give me food. I am earning my own food.
Tijuana is not only known for being a major border city, but also for the work opportunities that can be found here. In this multicultural city, migrants who are part of the caravan are slowly integrating into everyday life.
And Mexican police have continued their clampdown on members of the migrant caravan. 3 migrants were arrested by police in Tijuana for minor offenses on Tuesday night. According to these reports, migrants were allegedly disturbing order and smoking marijuana. Earlier this week, Tijuana authorities announced that they had arrested 34 members of the caravan for various misdemeanors. Moving on to Brazil, Brazil's military police have invaded a landless workers' movement camp in Chapada do Apoji region this Tuesday. The movement has faced 4 eviction attempts in the month of November alone. The community set up barricade and is negotiating with the police to try to prevent the enforcement of the eviction order. Families brought out musical instruments to the barricade. Meanwhile, Bolsonaro has labeled them terrorists. The opposition leader of Brazil's lower house had this to say about the eviction attempt.
Right
now, we are at the Workers' Party bench, sending our solidarity to the families at the José María Tome camp. For more than 4 years, 150 families have lived on this land, but before this, they had nowhere to live or to work. For this reason, they occupied the area that was totally unproductive land in order to make use of the lands to grow food. And after 4 years, with the violent wave that's going on throughout the country, they are criminalizing social movements, and this is making its way to Ceará, and specifically the landless workers movement. So there are 150 families who live in this camp, and they deserve our solidarity and support for their struggle.
The greatest dangers for Brazil's indigenous communities come from agribusiness, mining, and lodging companies. On top of that, 90% of the doctors in their territories are set to return to Cuba following attacks by President-elect Jair Bolsonaro.
Continued attempts at appropriating indigenous land by foreign interests is the main reason for the increase in human rights violations against indigenous people in Brazil.
Ours is a continuous fight for Guarani lands. Women and children are dying. We need
promises. Indigenous land will see even greater reduction in size.
This incoming government threatens much more oppression for our people. They say they will take away our lands. This put us on high alert. We must protect protect our rights. We don't know what price we'll have to pay, but we are resisting.
Now, these communities face yet another problem. 90% of doctors who treated them are returning to Cuba after the president-elect made insulting comments about them.
Our people were suffering before the Cuban doctors arrived. After they came, everything improved. But now we are back to where we were. We need the help they provide. When they leave, who is going to help the Guarani people?
According to the latest census, almost 1 million people make up Brazil's many indigenous communities. In 2017, over 100 of them suffered violent deaths.
Uruguay's former president Julio Maria Sanguinetti believes that the asylum request of former Peruvian president Ala Garcia will have a negative impact on their relations with Peru. Sanguinetti says all the details of the request should be considered carefully before a final decision is made. He says this is unnecessary so far to maintain strong diplomatic ties. Our correspondent in Lima, Jaime Herrera, brings us more about Garcia's asylum request.
It's been 5 days since former President Alan Garcia took up residence in the Uruguayan ambassador's home in Lima. Garcia is waiting for a response from the Uruguayan government about his asylum claim. He's trying to avoid serving jail time for the corruption charges in the Odebrecht scandal. He reportedly received bribes from the Brazilian company to secure the contract to build Lima's subway system. Protests have been going since these accusations were made public, and more are planned for Wednesday. Over 100 trade unions and social organizations plan to gather outside the Uruguayan ambassador's home to demand that Garcia's asylum be rejected. They also want to ask the former president to keep his promise of facing justice.
Thank you, Jaime, for that report. Moving on to Chile, the appointed governor of the Araucanía region, Luis Mayol, has resigned following the murder of Mapuche Camilo Cartillanca. Telesur's correspondent in the area has confirmed the governor's resignation. Mayol has blamed the opposition for, quote, not supporting the change that we're accomplishing in the region. He says Cartillanca's case was a common criminal's death. And on top of the continued persecution of the Mapuche people, the government of Sebastián Piñera is also carrying out covert deportations of migrants. Let's find out more in this report.
Families have been living on the street for over a week. Men, women, senior citizens, and even pregnant women such as Mary, who is 7 months pregnant.
How long have you been sleeping here? How are you feeling? Have you gone to the hospital?
I have been here for over a week. It's very cold. We don't have a home or food. I don't want to be here anymore. I want to go back home.
Mary is one of the 82 Haitian migrants that were left behind from a flight that was supposed to take them back home to Port-au-Prince. Now people from Santa Cruz Parish are trying to find a way to help them.
This sort of treatment is reserved for black people. I know that sounds harsh, and people try to rationalize such acts with the most beautiful speeches. But it's nothing more than racism, discrimination, and being afraid of poor people.
According to official figures, between 2014 and 2017, the number of migrants in Chile rose by 232%. That's more than 1 million people. President Sebastián Piñera promised to tackle the immigration issue with his clean house policy, aiming to regulate the flow of migrants.
This whole charade by the government is to persecute and promote hostility against certain foreigners. While some immigrants are desired, others are unwanted, with the latter being people from the Dominican Republic, Haiti, Colombia, Venezuela, and even people from Peru and Ecuador.
Venezuela en parte, Ecuador.
In a show of solidarity, migrants march in honor of the young Mapuche Camilo Catrillanca, who was murdered by the state police. But they were met with tear gas, rubber bullets, water cannons, and even planes, all in the name of democracy.
We have witnessed these actions for years now. The last few governments have been very tough on the Mapuche. There is a lot of racism in trying to deny that these people have lived historically in these lands. Just like they are denied their rights, so too are the poor and the people of color.
Human rights are being denied to anyone that is unwanted.
The situation is critical. It's also shameful, in particular for the government for being so racist and xenophobic. The whole world needs to know what's happening here and help us find a solution. As I have said before, this return plan for migrants has been a complete failure.
With few resources, the rest of the migrants left stranded in Chile will have to rely on the goodwills of locals. They have been told another plane will take them home, but no one knows when. Until then, they will continue to live in these rough conditions.
Bolivia's Central Workers Federation has endorsed the candidacy of President Evo Morales. Morales thanked the union and the National Confederation of Professional Artists and Musicians of Bolivia for their support. He also said that with the help of anti-capitalist social movements, the movement for socialism can win the elections.
We've learned and understood that we are at the service of Bolivia. I thank your decision of supporting my candidacy in the next election. This will be an interesting campaign. We are an organized society against the empire. This campaign will feature the social movements against neoliberalism.
It has been 1 month since former Ecuadorian Vice President Jorge Glass started a hunger strike. Relatives of Glass are calling on national and international authorities to take action and review the former vice president's case. They say Glass' health is deteriorating and has worsened since they returned to jail from a recent trip to the hospital. Supporters say that the current government is responsible for his health and say he is the victim of political persecution.
What they are looking for in Jorge Glass' case is not justice, and it is not the only case. We have been suffering persecution. Our political bloc has been displaced. They haven't even allowed us to register the movement.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this.
The life is full of moments. Moments of fight.
Welcome back. The students in Colombia continue to protest against the government of President Iván Duque, demanding more economic resources to improve the quality of their education. The budget for Colombia's public universities has been reduced by 50% when compared to the amount of money they received back in 1992. This has led to a budget strain on public institutions, with some universities on the brink of bankruptcy.
The students are in classrooms that are not suitable for classes. Apart from that, we are faced with a decreasing number of teachers and also a decrease in the quality of their teaching.
We have almost 3 times more students from all over the country in all universities. So clearly, that has an impact on the quality of education and on the difficulty of providing quality higher education in Colombia.
More than 8 million Colombians have been forced to leave their homes. There are concerns these figures are increasing due to paramilitary groups' activities and government indifference. More in this report.
Violence continues to uproot millions in Colombia despite a peace agreement. Many are also made to endure long, drawn-out government bureaucracy, while others have made the streets their home.
We need a total restoration of our rights and our land. The Colombian state is still very far away from compensating us. We always have difficulty with that issue.
Joana Castillo tragically remembers how she lost her husband to extreme violence. His land is also gone, so the family no longer has a roof over their heads. Their livelihood was also stolen from them.
They killed my husband in front of our children. They shot me and took away all we earned through the years. It was not too much, only a small farm with some chickens, that's all.
Joanna experienced firsthand this type of forced displacement. She says now she feels as though she has been dealt a double blow by the government.
We feel deceived because the state is making fun of us, victims. The state is destroying us. It is not fair.
According to the victims' registry, close to 800,000 people have been forced out of the places they once called home. It's mainly happened in Catatumbo, Antioquia, Chocó, Cauca, Nariño, and Meta.
We are trying to develop what the 1448 law says about victims. But we have achieved many spaces where victims can be involved. We have lost many partners in the battle right now.
Victims demand that President Iván Duque and the government bring an end to displacement, which is endangering the lives of millions. Victims are also asking the authorities to guarantee that Colombians' rights are upheld.
Brazilian trade unions will take to the streets on Thursday to protest against social security and pension reforms proposed by President-elect Jair Bolsonaro. Union leaders say Bolsonaro's proposals will lead millions of workers to misery. He said the reforms are worse than those of outgoing President Michel Temer, reforms Temer abandoned in 2017 after pressure from unions. And the outgoing Brazilian President Michel Temer has signed a free trade agreement with his Chilean counterpart. The agreement will, among other things, eliminate roaming between the two nations.
It eliminates roaming, which will allow the 500,000 Brazilian tourists who visit Chile every year and the 300,000 Chilean tourists who go to Brazil every year to better communicate.
I also believe that this agreement is the fruit of a natural convergence between our two governments, and therefore between Brazil and Chile.
Wednesday was the third day of the Forum on Critical Thinking in Argentina. This event is taking place just under a week before the G20 meeting in that country. The theme of the event is fighting for equality, social justice, and democracy. During the fourth-day meeting, leaders are discussing social issues affecting the region. Among the many topics being discussed at the forum are the issues that indigenous communities face, the rise of neoliberalism, and its attempts to erasing the legacy of the left wing. Let's now take a look at what today's speakers had to say.
Today, but especially in 2018, we continue to have very repressive state policies. They are racist towards our people. They stigmatize our struggles to recover our ancestral territories that were stolen away from us hundreds of years ago. They are still owned by the same people or by logging companies. Today, we are being invaded by multinational corporations, specifically by mining and hydroelectric companies.
We have been hearing a lot about the end of progressive movements in Latin America. And yes, many right-wing governments have taken power. Neoliberalism is strong at the moment, but there are also positive signals, such as López Obrador's victory in Mexico, which is a very progressive movement.
We cannot forget about our many victories during the first decade of this century. These newly empowered right-wing or sometimes far-right governments are trying to erase the memory of everything the left achieved and say that fruitful period was marred with corruption. Lula is corrupt, Cristina is corrupt, Correa is corrupt. There were no social policies. Everything was corruption. There were no scholarships, no health care, no right to education, nothing. This forum is so important because we need to remind people of the Latin American left-wing's victories.
St. Lucia's main opposition party has filed a motion of non-confidence against Prime Minister Alain Chastanet. St. Lucia's Labour Party is calling for his immediate resignation over allegations of abuse of public office, unsustainable fiscal deficit, and misuse of state finances. The opposition also raised concerns over the Prime Minister's healthcare and education policies. Chastanet is also Minister of Finance, Economic Growth, Job Creation, and Foreign Affairs. The Guyanese President David Granger has returned to his country after undergoing cancer treatment in Cuba. The President expressed gratitude to his cabinet and the rest of the nation for their support. The 73-year-old politician was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and spent close to 3 weeks in Havana receiving medical treatment. British rock star and founder of Pink Floyd, Roger Waters, has visited indigenous communities in Ecuador's Amazon region. He's showing support to the communities affected by decades of oil pollution by the multinational Chevron Texaco. Telesur sat down for an exclusive interview with Roger Waters.
this story that we're looking at here in Ecuador of an American company coming in to focus on the bottom line for its shareholders, with no concern for the people or the politics or the needs or the development of the people who actually live there or who've lived there for the last few thousand years at all. That is the sad and sickening thing about the American empire, is that they've fucked up so many other places, and as did the British, I have to say, as do all colonial empires. They really screw things up. They don't help anybody to progress or go anywhere. They only hinder the potential the human race has to develop in a progressive way.
We'll be back in a minute. Stay with us.
The Pakistani journalist Tariq Ali examines the mass media influence promoted by imperialism. Get access to the analysis of the socio-economic and political life of the whole South America on our screen and platform in English. A critical place committed to the truth to determine the major events that transform the world today. Mondays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. The joint opposition candidate in the Democratic Republic of Congo has launched his presidential campaign for the upcoming elections. After a 2-year delay, the country has started campaigning for the December polls. Martin Fayulu is among the front runners to replace outgoing President Joseph Kabila. Around 40 million people are eligible to vote.
The message is that there is a common candidate, and you see all the groups that make up the opposition are there. The joint candidate is here. I am the common candidate. I represent these groups. I am a spokesperson, a standard bearer for credible, transparent, peaceful elections and for ensuring prosperity in Congo.
Palestinians have had their stores leveled to the ground, losing their livelihoods. Here's more on that and a look at other stories from around the world.
Israeli forces have demolished dozens of Palestinian-owned shops in a refugee camp east of Jerusalem. Business owners were given a 12-hour notice to leave. They were reportedly targeted for not having a hard-to-get Israeli permit. A portrait of a young Charles Dickens, the well-known writer behind Oliver Twist and A Christmas Carol, has been found in South Africa, 150 years after it went missing. The miniature watercolor painting is valued at $280,000 and was painted in 1843 when Dickens was in his 30s. It was last on display at the Royal Academy of Arts in London in 1844, only to disappear afterwards. In 1886, it was reported as unaccounted for. How the portrait got to South Africa is unknown. It will be on display at the Philip Mould and Company Gallery until the end of January 2019.
This lost face of such an important man in our literary culture, suddenly returning from the dust of Africa, from the heat and the dust. And the first thought that we had was, this must never escape again. This is such an important, emotive face at such a critical time in his career. So we're working now with the Dickens Museum, who we hope will be able to raise sufficient funds to be able to buy it and repatriate it and put it back in the house where he lived.
UAE and France have signed a cooperation agreement despite a lawsuit against Abu Dhabi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. France's foreign minister met with the Crown Prince in Paris, who was on a 2-day visit to the country. The International Alliance for the Defence of Rights and Freedoms in France filed a lawsuit against the Crown Prince, who is also the Deputy Supreme Commander of the UAE Armed Forces. He is accused of war crimes in Yemen.
An exhibition celebrating Michael Jackson's music opens in Paris on Friday. The curator of the exhibition says the work on display aims to bring to light the singer's race and identity politics, which are considered to be taboo subjects in France.
And also what motivated me, and I lived for 7 years in London, so I'm very conscious of the difference on the subject of the social construction of race. In France it's almost taboo to talk about race. It's very different culture in that regard to the British culture or the American culture. So I saw this exhibition and how it revisits the complexity of identity politics in relation to Michael Jackson was spot on to maybe trigger new debates in French culture.
We come to the end of this news brief. This and many other stories you can find at our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.